Hello, I'm at the Glebe. It's part of the Mallory Park complex, and I'm here today for a specific reason. I've come to catch up with an angler who I consider has been a phenomenon over the last decade. Most match anglers, if they won 100 open matches in their career, they'd think they'd done very well. In a short space of 3 years, Andy won over 100 open matches on this complex alone. But he's not a method angler. He's not a guy who just catches on the paste or just catches on pellets. He catches on all methods. I know he's fishing the sweetcorn this morning, which has kind of become unfashionable, but he's still a great believer in the method. I'm going to go and see how he's getting on. See you later. Morning.
Morning, Dave.
Nice to know some things never change.
Yeah, I've been fishing about half an hour, and this is my second fish I've had on. It feels about 4 or 5 pounds, decent fish.
Were you fishing straight out?
No, I'm fishing in the margins, about 16 metres range.
That's a lump.
Yeah.
The light's not great, is it?
No, it's where my float is. It's rippling with the reflection of the bank. It makes it very hard to see. It's a chunky fish. That's probably nearer 7 pound. That is.
Cracking. It's an incredible place, isn't it?
It is. Nice chunky thing.
Isn't it a nice fish?
Yeah.
Don't need too many of them, do you? When I spoke to you on the phone, you said you were going to be fishing the sweetcorn today, and that seems to have gone out of fashion a little bit. Have you had that on the sweetcorn?
Yeah, it was. It was on one piece of sweetcorn. I'm actually feeding sweetcorn. That's the only bait I've got on my tray, because I've got a lot of confidence this time of year, April, May, where the fish are just waking up, and it's a bait that's the carp seem to take readily without filling themselves up. It's surprising how much corn you can get through fishing a 5-hour match. Once you start getting bites, you can really ladle the stuff in, and it just brings more and more fish into the peg without filling them up. I think really it's the reason for it is that when it's all crushed down, it just turns to water. So there's not actually a lot of food in there.
No.
That's right.
And what are you using? Golden Sweet?
Yeah, it's a cheap brand I buy from Lidl actually. That's not the reason I use it mostly. It's because it's cheap, but the uniform size and the bright yellow colour. A lot of the corn varies these days. Years ago I used to use Green Giant, but that seemed to go a lot paler and softer. But this stuff is, you know, it's quite uniform size and a really bright yellow colour, and actually you can try it if you eat it yourself, just like a few grains. I'm not really keen on sweet corn, but if you taste different brands, then you'll find that some sweeter than the others.
Yeah, I was talking to Jan Porter about it, and he uses sweet corn a lot for his carp fishing.
Yeah.
And he buys Tesco's cheapest.
Right.
And now, what he said was completely contrary to what you've just said, because he said what he liked about the Tesco was it was all different shapes and sizes.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I don't go along with that, because I liked the thing with unisized pieces of corn is that they sink at the same rate, you know, and you know that where you pot them in, they're on the bottom. So that's where your hook bait must lie, right in the pile of corn that you've fed. The smaller bits are obviously lighter, so that means when there's fish over them, then, you know, the fish are going to waft the lighter bits out of the peg or away from where you're trying to present your bait.
Yeah. And how many pots of that have you put in up to yet?
Well, this is very important, the feeding of the corn. I've started here, because I'm fishing in the margin, you know, I don't really expect to catch early on, but I've started with probably half a pot of corn.
Yeah.
And then after every fish, my plan is to feed about that much corn on top.
Right.
So every time I've caught a fish, played it, put it in my keep net, and straight after I go out, not with my rig, but with my pole pot, and pot in about, you see how much corn I've put in there?
Handful.
Yeah, I reckon, what is there? There's probably 100 grains of corn there.
Yeah, probably.
And that's enough bait. You know, I know the size of fish in this lake range from 3 to 15 pound, but the average is 3 to 7 pound. And I think there's enough bait there to catch, well, to get four or five fish feeding on the bottom on that much corn, you know, and that's for 10 minutes or so, and that's the time I expect to get a bite.
Right.
If I don't get a bite, then, or if I catch a fish, I'll just ship back, put the fish in the keep net, or rebait if I've not caught a fish, and go out and pot that much corn in again.
Right.
So you're looking just to get a few fish in your peg, not loads and loads of fish, just a few fish in your peg, eating, you know, that much corn in that much area on the bottom. And of course your hook bait's right in the middle of that pile as well.
And
so
when you fish your hook bait on the bottom?
Yeah, it's just like an inch over depth in the middle of that pile of corn. So it's very likely to be taken as a fish are eating your feed.
Okay, so away we go. This is going to be one of those days where when the sun comes in and you'll be able to see one colour flow.
Yeah, it's very awkward. What I've actually done is plumbed up to find about 2 feet of water in the margins. But as it's happened, the light is very awkward to see afloat there with the ripple.
Yeah.
So I've just changed my position slightly to 6 inches to the right, which is nearer the margin, where the water appears darker and I can see my float a lot better there.
It's amazing how close to the bank you can catch these fish, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you know, again, it's because it's a time of year that the fish are, I'm taking time to pot that in there because what I need is it to be, you know, in one place. And don't spread it around, it wants to be in one place so that you can, you know, your hook bait can sit in the middle of it. But yeah, you know, the water's warming at this time of year and the fish realise that and they want to be up into the shallow water. So that's why the margins are a good place to target.
The wind has just been kind to you.
Yeah, it's easy to see the float now. Makes a lot of difference. I just dropped that right on that last pot of corn I put
Yes, you
in.
did. I was looking at that marker that you've got on the bank and it was spot on. It looked a big fish.
No, I think it's a skimmer.
It's come to the top. You were saying a few moments ago that you like the sweet corn at this time of year. I think we're all aware of how devastating that could be foul up.
No, I don't think so. Just wrap round, I think.
How devastating the pellet has become in recent times. But what's the deciding factor on you coming to a match and deciding you're going to fish sweet corn as opposed to another bait?
It's got to be the time of year and the temperature of the water. I'd say they're the two major factors. Now, it looks foul up that, but it isn't. It's just
wrapped round
tucked
it.
under its fin.
Is that the average stamp of skimmers in here?
Yeah, they're normally a better than average size. You know, that's knocking on £2, that is.
Yeah, and it's spawning.
Yeah,
or it's spawned.
Yeah, it's
you can
a
always
male
tell by
fish.
the nodules on the top of the head.
That's right.
And I don't know why it's predominantly male fish that get it. When we used to fish at this time of year in Ireland, you'd often used to find that there would be big, hard nodules on the top of the head. It is amazing also, sweet corn, that anything that swims will take it.
Catches everything, yeah. That's the beauty of it. I'm just taking a few minutes, less than a few minutes, but just it's worth taking time to select a big piece of corn because I know the fish run big in here, and again it stands out from from the pile of corn that you've potted in. You know, it's a target bait that the fish are likely to see before the corn you've fed.
And what size hook are you on there?
Well, actually, that's a, believe it or not, that's an 18, and it's a small size in an 18.
Yes, it is. I thought it was probably a 20.
Yeah, well, in some brands it would be a 20, but there's reasons for this. The way I hook it, it's just nicked on like a maggot, if you like. Yep. You know, with this sort of fishing, you get lots of liners, but I'm not really striking at the liners. I'm just lifting my rig out of the water to drop it back in. Now, what I've done, I've just nicked that on with the point showing, so it's very difficult for a fish to take that without getting hooked once I've lifted into it. But supposing I was using a bigger hook, like a 16 or a 14, which many people do, when you lift out, you'll find that you've buried most of the hook inside the corn, but when you lift the rig out and it's not a bite, your hook will come right out.
Yes.
And the fish can see all the hook. But you see that then, you know, it's still barely noticeable when it's on the bottom, a small hook like that. And I'm 100% confident that when I keep lifting the rig out, my corn's still on and it's likely to be taken because the fish just can't see a small hook like that.
No, particularly in coloured water like this.
Yeah. Right, I've caught a fish then, so what I need to do now is I've baited my hook, ready to drop it on where I've fed, so I need to feed now.
Here you go again. There's one or two there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, it's getting better.
At what point would you say that we've now reached the point where I don't think sweet corn is as productive as it was in April and May?
Well, I mean, normally, come June, July time, then I turn to paste them because I think the fish have, you know, got a good appetite by then. The water's been warm for long enough and they want something more substantial to eat. But saying that, corn's one of them baits that will work all year round. You know, when the water's 3 degrees, it's sometimes, well, most of the time, the best bait to have on the hook.
Yeah.
And even when it's 25 degrees, then it's a really good bait. But what you'll find is in them temperatures, you just need to feed more of it. But there's never a day when a carp won't eat a piece of corn. Really
and also it's a great bait in the sense that it's no hassle having a tin of corn in your bag, is it?
No, that's it. You know, you don't have to open it.
No.
Or sometimes it can just be effective just as a hook bait over other baits like pellet, ground bait or meat.
And would you ever use it as a change bait in a match?
Well, really, I mean, I'm not one to swap around with me hook baits because I know certain things work, different combinations work, and it's just getting your feeding right that you know makes you start catching. But yeah, I'm not saying, you know, don't change your baits, but if you're happy with a combination of feeding and hook bait, then and sticking by it for when the fish are ready to feed, then you know you'll end up catching a lot more than by keep swapping your baits, I believe.
What elastic are you using?
This is the 15, the blue 15 Holler H that Preston Innovations do. It's about balanced right for these size of fish. That's about £5. From £3 to £8, and it is about right for the blue. And then anything over that, or if you're using a bigger hook on the rig, then I'd step up to the 19.
I've noticed the way you connect your line to your elastic is quite unique. Perhaps when you've got this out, we'll have a look at it, because you don't use a standard setup, do you?
No. Actually, what's happened there is
So the hook comes straight through?
Yeah, it's got caught in the net and the hook's passed through the fish's lip, but there we go. See how it's just nicked in there, Dave?
Yeah.
All that pressure on the elastic and it's not going to pull out. So, you know, I'm a great believer in using small hooks for carp.
That was a nice fish. Let's have a look at this rig and this attachment you've got on the end for connecting your elastic to your line. How does that work? Because I've never seen anything like that.
No, well, I think I'm the only one using this type of attachment. You know, for things to be right for my type of fishing, then I'm known to adapt things that I'm happy with. And what this is it's a small loop, and what the name of it is called stren. And what stren is, a long time ago, they used to use it for fly line backing. When you used to go fly fishing, you only had 30 yards of fly line and then you had backing at the back of it. And what it is like a really stiff monofilament.
Right.
And all they do is tie a loop in that, a small loop, cut it off, and then that's just overhand knotted onto the blue elastic. Just a simple overhand
And does
knot.
that stay on all the time?
That's on all the time.
Right.
That's all it is, lubricate that knot, that blue elastic knot, just before I pull it down. And all the rig is, the actual rig itself is just a lasso knot, if you like, that tightens over the knot.
Right.
Just like, you know, you
so do you do a double loop?
No,
you
it's
do a
just a single loop. But because it's fairly stiff line that we use these days for this sort of fishing, then it's easy just to tease it open just by pushing the double, and it'll open up for you, just like that, and you can pull it out. So it's a nice simple way of attachment, and it's feather light. You know, a lot of the times, the right way to tension your elastic for carp fishing or any other sort of fishing is to have it just gradually creeping back into the end of your pole, just like that's doing. But after a few fish, your elastic might stretch and you'll find it hangs out like that, which is, you know, with that type of connection, I'm still happy with that because it's a lightweight connection. What you don't want is like a heavy connector that's going to flap about and wobble, cause tangles with your line going around the pole tip, which never happens this way.
Okay, let's just look at this float because it's a very short stem. Is this a float you've modified?
It is. It's a Preston float, and actually it's a canal float for catching small fish with. The model is a PB14, and this one takes 4 number 12s. But what's right for my fishing, for this sort of fishing, it needs to have a heavy stem, which is of wire. That gives the float stability. As well, but as the float comes standard, it has a really fine fibre tip, you know, for like sensitive bites off small fish. But what I do, as soon as I get the float, is pull that tip out and replace it with actually this is a bristle off of a Dura float, another Preston float, but you can see it's a hollow tip. It's impregnated with a fluorescent colour and makes it very visible and is buoyant, which holds the corn up. You know, every time you get a liner, it don't pull the float under, you just get an indication. So it's a very important thing, a float is.
But is this a float that you would only use fishing shallow?
Yes, it is. It is. You know, I only use 3 or 4 patterns of floats in all my carp fishing, but this is the one I use when the depth's under 3 feet.
Yeah. And you're fishing with a back shot?
Yeah, the back shot, again, very important. There's hardly at all a fish with a float without using a back shot. And the reason for this is to get the line under the water when the float's sitting right. It gets it out the way of the skim and the float sits, you know, rock steady, and so you're waiting for a bite. Your rig's not continually getting dragged out of position by the wind catching onto your line.
Now I noticed that you're using stots, and I've started using them. And I find them fantastic. I think you just hooked your shoe.
I've got my shoelace. That's how sharp these hooks are.
I use them because I find it very difficult getting small shot on now, and I do find that they're quite easy. I either just put one on my finger or lay the line across it and squeeze it.
Yeah.
But they are excellent, and the thing I like most about them is they slide, don't they? Slide easy.
You know, the main reason they would develop was because you carp fishing, your rig's under a lot of stress. If you're catching a lot of fish, your line's twanging all the time, and the original round shot used to ping off without you knowing it. You'd chip out again, and you think, well, I've lost some shot here, and they were prone to doing that. But because these are thick round the ends of the shot, then you don't get that problem, and that shot will stay on there for, you know, as long as you'd like it to.
No, I find them excellent. And we talked earlier about your hook, which is, we've already established, is a size 20. But what, and the fish I've seen you catch this morning are substantial in size. What kind of a hook is it? I mean, you've explained why you use a 20, but what type of a hook is it?
Yeah, well, it's actually called a PR29, which the Preston do. But the makeup of the hook, it's made from a very strong wire that's been forged. And it's a type of hook, it's a crystal bend, and although it's a strong wire, it's been forged, so it means it's, you know, really strong and won't bend open under stress. And like I say, all you do is nick your corn on there, and the hook's, because it's so small, it's barely visible.
But very sharp.
Oh, extremely sharp, and it's a sort of hook that you can catch fish after fish, and the point will stay on it, it won't come off.
Let's see if we can catch some more. You're just a bagging machine. Well, you're obviously going to be here till dusk.
I hope so.
And it's getting stronger and stronger as the day goes on. I'm going to get out of your life. I've enjoyed today, Andy. And I think that what you've demonstrated to me is that despite the fact that from time to time it seems to go out of fashion, SWEETCORN in all its simplicity is still a super bait, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's the best all-round bait.
Hello again. Well, as you can see, nothing really changes. It's still April. We're back at the Glebe. It's a lovely day, and today I've caught up with Andy to talk about the method feeder. I first saw the method feeder being used on this fishery 20 years ago. Thought the guy was chucking out a football. I was fishing a waggler, he chucked this thing all over the lake. I finished up with 12 pound, he finished up with 44 pound. I think I realised there and then that the method was the method. But it's become much more sophisticated since then. And nobody has done more to perfect this method than Andy Findlay. Just sit back and enjoy this. It's a nice fish, Andy.
It is. It looks about, I don't know, 6 or 7 pound. It's normal stamper fish in this lake. Just been fishing an hour now, and this is the second one I've had on, so it's starting slowly.
But it's that time of year, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's just beginning to warm up now.
This is the same rod that you used when you were fishing the conventional feeder. It's a very light rod, isn't it? And yet it seems to handle these big fish extremely well.
It's a good balance, really, because what you need, you don't want the stiff rods of years ago where they used to chuck that football out that you mentioned. You know, the feeders have been more refined now, and the average weight of a loaded feeder is around about 2 ounces. So you need a fairly soft rod to cast, you know, a weight of around that size. As well as that, you know, you see this fish, this is sort of an average size fish for a commercial, around about 6 pound. And you see how my rod's bent there, it's under load, but it's doing the job.
Yes,
you know,
it is. And you do get the impression there's a bit more there if you need it.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a nice...
So it is. It's a nice even balance.
I'll tell you what is also noticeable these days. In the early days with these carp, you used to get great big bites, didn't you? Pull the rod off the rest. They seem to be a lot more cautious in picking up a bait these days.
Yeah, I suppose you're right in one sense, but because these days we use softer tips, more sensitive tips, and the reason behind that is because when you get liners, I don't want the feeder to move, so the tip gives instead of the feeder moving.
Right.
You know, but you say that they're not as ferocious. But if I left the bite, normally I pick up on the bite within a few seconds of it going round. But if I left the bite to develop and not holding my rod, then sure enough, after a minute or so, the fish would pull my rod in. So once the fish realises it's hooked, it will bolt away, just like in the old days.
Yes, that one, once it realised it was hooked, took off fairly rapid, didn't it?
Yeah, normally, you know, a lot of lads still strike when fishing the method, but I don't think that's necessary at all, because normally the type of bite you get when fishing the method, it just pulls the rod round 2 foot and fast. That to me tells me that the fish is hooked, you know, and it's on its way, it's trying to escape. So all I do is pick the rod up and just let the elastic and the rod do the work. You know, the hook's already in, and slowly wind the fish in.
I used to fish Mallory on a fairly regular basis. Remember they used to have the Monday night matches?
Yeah.
And I first came across the method feeder about 20 years ago, and of course it was a very basic method in those days, a bit like the early days of the swim feeder. But it's come on in leaps and bounds, hasn't it? I mean, it really is a devastating method now.
It has. You know, it was in them days, because in them days the fish just wasn't used to the setup. All of a sudden it's a big ball of ground bait with plenty of feed packed in it, and the fish just look at it and think food and just dive in. But of course, as time goes on, all the fish are getting caught on this method and they begin to wise up. So, you know, then the anglers need to start to think on ways of refining it.
Well, the guy I first saw doing it at Mallory, the size of the ball of ground bait that he had wrapped around this feeder was such that he had to fish with carp rods just to chuck it out. I mean, looking at your setup today, I mean, this is a fairly straightforward ledge rod, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
quiver tip.
That's right. I mean, you know, the way it's come on, the feeders are scaled down. There's not the amount of weight on them as there would be in the old days, and also the amount of bait that's put around the feeder is a lot less now. I suppose it's fair to say that maybe I was the first angler to start thinking about the method and refining it, because I remember the days when I used to go method fishing, in the days you're talking about, where they used to chuck these great big feeders in. But my fishing was like, I was just getting more liners than bites, and I was thinking to myself, you know, there must be a way around this. So, you know, I like to tailor my kit to my own
Fish there now, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. I like to make my kit to what I think is happening under the water. So what I come across was making what's now known as a flatbed feeder. And basically all it is just a flat plate of lead with a wire frame glued onto it. And the way I thought it'd work is, you know, there's a lot less feed there, but what's actually happening is as the fish come on, you know, there's no bait underneath the feeder, which isn't what you want. You just want all your bait on top of the feeder, so the fish can come in on feed on it and hopefully take your bait as it appears. So this is a sort
How long ago is it since you made that?
Well, this feeder here is probably 6 or 7 years old, because that's how long, you know, that's how long I've been fishing the method. Well, I was fishing it before then, but you know, it took that time to begin to think what was actually happening. I think I've got a bite, Dave.
Oh, I think, John. Every chance. Every chance. How long have you been here?
I've been here about an hour now, but it started very slowly. I've just had one fish, but this feels a decent fish.
I think the problem we've got right now, because it's April, and the conditions that we've enjoyed for the last 2 or 3 weeks have been fantastic. But two things: one, the water's still cold, and B, they have been spawning, haven't they?
They have, yeah. You know, it's always a funny time of year, yeah. April, because, okay, the fish are happy to be in the warmer water now, but they have other things on the mind, which of course puts them off feeding. But
as it does.
Yeah, as it does. But normally the time of day is the important thing. You know, the first 2 hours of a match can often be good, and then you'll get a lull for the next 2 hours in the middle of the day before it comes good towards the end.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not always at the end of the day.
No.
Sometimes it can be just when you get a bit of air, you know, the air temperature rises a bit, it just makes the water just creep up, you know, a degree or so, and then that can just trigger them to feed.
Yeah.
Just for, you know, it can't be long, sometimes only half hour before they'll just shut up again.
We had a dreadful spring last year, but this year it's been delightful, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. Feels a decent fish.
Is it? Are you using the new S pellets?
I am, yeah.
They're excellent, aren't they?
They are. They're more or less tailor-made for the method, because as you always bury the hook bait inside the feeder, then it doesn't matter what sort of pressure you put onto the feeder and the hook bait inside, that the pellet always stays intact. It's not like a soft expander that might crush and come off the hair.
What's the thinking behind the back shot?
The back shot's very important for method fishing when you're fishing up to an island, because what it does, it keeps the line down onto the bottom, away from the liners of the fish. what's really important in method fishing is once the feeder's hit the bottom and you're waiting for a bite, the feeder cannot move until you get a bite. So any liners you get, you know, it's no good the feeder moving because it upsets the whole setup.
Which is why the carp lads use these lead cores, isn't it?
Yeah,
just
that's
to keep
right.
it nailed.
Yeah, I mean,
just an improvisation on a theme.
Yeah. I know some match lads that use lead core, but I think it's more visible
Yes,
to
I
the
agree
fish,
with
you know, than
you.
a single shot. So that's why I go for this option.
This Roy Marlowe's done a fantastic job here, hasn't he, on these lakes?
Yeah, it really is see, one of the most difficult things in this type of fishing is having a fair fishery. You know, where...
You did that well.
Yeah, it's because I'm talking at the same time. But, you know, it can be the hardest thing. It's no good just one or two pegs on a lake producing the winner or the second every time.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
And that's the beauty of this fishery. When you draw it, you just, you know, it's more or less down to the angler, not the peg, as to who wins the match.
And getting them out.
Eventually.
They do fight, don't they?
They do. I'm never an angler to rush fish, you know, every fish you get on the hook, if you take your time, get it in the net, then you're never far away at the end of the match.
In many ways you remind me of Ivan, because Ivan's approach to fishing was always very simplistic. It was all about bait presentation.
That's my number one rule really in fishing, is to keep it simple. You can make it as complicated as you like, but you know, it's
because this really is a great method for the pleasure angler, isn't it? I mean, it's a way of the pleasure angler putting it, because although you do it what a pretty
it's a nice fish.
What a nice fish. Andy, before you chuck out again, let's just have a look at your rig. Well, we've not moved on too far from the homemade job, have we?
No. As you've seen before, my homemade original, Preston have took it one stage further and produced this, which is the best flatbed feeder I know that's commercially available. If you look at it, it's got 3 bars which help whatever the bait that you're putting onto the feeder, but the lead is actually on the base, so whatever way it lands in the water, it can spin round and land that way. So all your bait is facing up on a plate, if you like, ready for the fish to come in and eat it.
What you're doing here, I would venture that a lot of anglers are still wrapping ground bait around their feeder. Now you're using pellets here. Can you just show me how you load that?
Yeah. Well, you know, first of all, the first thing you do is to put your bait on. I'm using the new S pellets in an 8mm size.
These are... I think these are fantastic, and I think this resealable bag is a great idea. Great idea.
You know, a bag like that probably lasts me all season.
Oh.
You know, they're not very expensive, but because they're in a resealable bag, they won't go off. There's very little preservative in the pellets, but it's mostly oil. So, you know, in a way, that preserves it itself.
And is this a fish meal based?
Yeah, they're very similar makeup to the feed pellets I'm using, but they're impregnated with oil. So, in turn, that makes them not really soft as a normal expander is, but makes them firm. But you know, you don't need to pre-drill them or pre-spike them. You can just push a quick stop straight through without splitting it. Just take the needle out, and that's on for good. And because it's firm, when you pack bait onto the feeder, it doesn't squash. You know, it stays in a pellet shape. Is what you want.
I think the quick stops are fantastic.
They are. They're really. It's another one of my ideas. It's a modern invention whereas you're not fumbling about looking for stops to put inside tiny loops.
Bits of grass and all that sort of stuff.
All you do is tie the quick stop onto your hook length before you tie your hook on.
Yeah.
And then they've got a hole in one end that you just insert the needle and push everything through the bait like I've just done.
Let's see this. I'm fascinated by this.
So this is the way I start to make the feeder up. It's a two-stage process really. Very simple. You know, the phrase to mould feeder onto the feeder isn't right for me. It's more of a patting the bait onto the feeder. So this is how I do it. It's just take a shallow handful of pellets and put the feeder face down so the bars are down onto the pellets, and just press down with your finger. And you'll find that if you've got the pellets done right, they should stick to the base of the feeder like that. You really want to just cover the bars, but that's fine, that's okay. And then the second stage is exactly the same as the first, but this time you lay your hook bait pellet in the middle of the pile of pellets, and as you go to press them onto the feeder, you want to make sure that the hook pellet is right in the middle on top of the feeder, just like that, so that it's more or less pressing on that middle bar of the feeder. Yeah. And just give it a good old press with your thumb, and you'll find that they've all stuck to the feeder like that. Now that's not good enough to cast out yet, because you'll see it's overlapping the sides of the feeder, and they still need firming on more. So all you do then is just take the feeder by the stem. That's what the stem's there for, so you can hold it when you're actually making the bait up, and just with a squeezing action of your hand, just bear down onto the feeder and press in at the same time. And really you can you know, it's worth spending a lot of time doing this, up to 5 minutes while you're still fishing. Remember, you can have a feeder out there while you're fishing and doing this, so you know you're not losing any fishing time.
So what you're saying in essence is that you could have a second one of them there.
Sure.
And when you reel in, you just unclip that, put the new one on, and while you sat waiting for a bite.
That's right, you can just unclip them on and off like that. You know, while you're fishing, you can spend as long as you like making the next feeder up. So it definitely pays to spend time overdoing this. Right where I want it. Feels another good fish, Dave.
Takes you back to when you were on the saw, Andy, doesn't it?
Not quite. On the odd fly I used to draw in them days when I were on big fish, but there's nothing to beat this.
No. One of the observations I noticed with a lot of pleasure anglers is they keep changing the angle of the rod. Now you seem to consistently keep your rod low to the water.
Yeah.
What's you thinking there?
Well, when the fish is further out, then, you know, really the quickest way of getting a fish in is keeping your rod low and just trying to wind the fish in or pump it in. See, this is quite a big fish.
Yeah, this is a nice fish.
But it's only about now, when the fish is about beating and it's ready to be netted, that you raise the rod to get it up near the surface.
Right. It's got to be about 7 or 8 pounds, isn't it?
It's another good fish.
And they are in beautiful condition, aren't they?
Yeah, they get well fed, really. You know, the anglers that fish on here, it's all good stuff that they throw in, so
well, I think that's the
keeps them in
key,
good
isn't it? That's the
condition.
key these days. Is that net going to be big enough?
Just.
Tell you what, 20 years ago, you'd have been on the front page of the Angling Times with that, wouldn't you?
Just commonplace now.
Yeah.
You'll see, you probably can't see this, but I've hooked it in the bottom lip. That's the most common place you get them on the method. It's just because it's a self-hooking rig, and it's, you know, it's just the way that they get hooked.
What a lovely fish.
Very nice.
What a lovely
condition fish.
Super fish. Now I'm going to put you on the spot now, because we've been talking about pellets. And you've just launched a range of ground bait.
I have.
Tell me about it.
It's from a new company called So New Baits. What we're doing is a range of feed pellets, halibut pellets, there's a paste mix, and 2 different types of ground bait, one for the method and one for just normal open-end feeder fishing. What we also have is these new S pellets, and what they are a ready-made pellet, ready to hair rig or just hook on, without no preparation at all. They just come in a resealable bag, and one bag of them probably lasts you all season. There's very little preservative in there, it's just fish attracting oil, so it helps preserve the pellet.
When would you use the ground bait as opposed to the pellet, and how does that mould as opposed to the pellets? Show me.
It moulds in very much the same manner, really. The actions are the same, just a shallow handful for a start, press the feeder on.
And you don't put any feed in with that?
No feed at all. You know,
that is the feed?
Yeah, that is the feed. The fish just comes across that pellet when it's broken down and takes it, because it's the only morsel there worth eating.
And what influences your decision to fish with the ground bait as opposed to the pellet? Really, ground bait is better when the average size of the fish in a lake is sort of 3 pound average. Smaller fish?
Yeah. You know, a £1 to £4 size fish, ground bait's perfect. But once the fish sort of start getting over £5 and £6, then I've found it better to use pellets on the method.
Go on and catch us a £3. Sod's law, isn't it? That might be a bite.
Just a bit.
Beautiful fish. £5, £6?
£3.40.
Well, there you have it. What have we learned? Well, we've learned that certainly modern baits work, for sure, even though you do catch bigger ones than you wanted to. But it's all about accurate casting. It's all about simplicity. There's nothing complicated about Andy. I've enjoyed these 2 sessions that we've had together. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you'll join us again sometime. Thanks a lot. Bye. Imagine trying to get that on the hook. I'm using one of them as a float and catching £150 a carp. Don't ask me, Andy Findlay knows. Let's come find out. Do you know, I could really get to dislike you.
Why is that?
Whenever I see you, you're bagging. How long have you been here?
Just 10 or 15 minutes. Second fish so far. I've only had 4 or 5 puts in.
On the paste?
Yeah, on the really sloppy stuff.
So where are we? We're on Lake 4, aren't we?
Yeah. It's a lake that's full of you know, decent sized carp, starting from about £3 up to £15.
Well,
So,
the last time I caught up with you were on Lake 5. I mean, that seems to be, all of these lakes seem to be full of fish.
yeah, it's an incredible fishery. So,
Is it
that's
my
possibly-
imagination, or is your tackle a bit more robust?
yeah, it is. Because what I'm fishing today is paste, you know, there's no point messing around with fine gear. That's a bit of a runt of a fish, that is, actually, and one of the smaller sort in here. But a nice fish nonetheless.
It's got a bump, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the ugly sort that are in here. But still put up a good fight.
This has got to be the only fishery in the world that's actually got a lake called Uglies. Just before you ship out again, can you explain this most unusual rig that you've got? I suspect that an awful lot of people have never seen this before.
Right, well, starting at the hook end, I've got one of the new Corum S3 size 10 hooks, and they're a really strong, sharp hook, heavy hook that's not going to bend under the pressure of the fish. That's a good tip with this method, is the way I've tied it. If you can see that tag end on there,
Yeah.
normally, you know, when you're fishing other baits, you'd cut that really short. But because I'm fishing sloppy paste, that tag end, it's quite stiff line, this, you know, it's 017 power line. It creates another barb on the hook, if you like, and what that does is when you put the sloppy paste on, it helps hold it to the hook, you know, so it just stays on a few more seconds when it's in the swim. So moving up from that, my float, instead of a traditional float, I've got what we call a polyball, which is just threaded on the line. There's a rubber stop in there that keeps it fixed on the line, and underneath that I've got a little number 10 Stotts shot, which is acting as a depth marker, so if it does move, I can just you know, move it back to that.
Yeah.
The beauty of this type of float with this sloppy paste fishing is it can never tangle. What I do with this method is put the paste in the pot. If I can just get it off that. When I've put the paste in the pot, then there's no way, when I tip that paste out into the lake, that line cannot tangle round the float. Like with a traditional float,
Yeah.
there'll be a bristle in there, and the line could hoop round the bristle and cause a tangle just as you're ready to fish. So that's the beauty of the polyball. Moving on from that, I've got the elastic and connector. I've got the pot. Now this is a very important piece of kit for sloppy paste fishing. It's a tall pot, but you'll notice that the open end is wider, and what that does is gather the paste up into a ball, so and like contains it into the right size piece. It's also very deep pot, and that's because what I do before I put my paste on is just put a small handful of pellets into the pot, about an inch or so.
And these are these skins?
They are. They're the only type of pellet I use with paste fishing, because they're quite a unique feed pellet in the way that they act in the water. Once they've been in the water for a few minutes, they just break up into a paste. You know, and that's what I'm fishing on the hook. So the fish are in the swim eating these pellets that are broken down into a paste.
And is
they're
the
not getting
paste
caught.
and the pellet both fish meal based?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's all fish meal pellet sort of based. You know, that's what the carp have been bred on, you know, from day one, so they take that readily. So going back to the pot, that's the pellets in there, and what I do now is putting the paste on the hook and put it in the pot. And the main reason I put them pellets in there is not only to feed the swim, but they make sure that the paste falls out of the pot when they turn it upside down, because the paste cannot stick to the pellets in there because it all falls out anyway.
And looking at the consistency of that paste that you've got there, which looks more like porridge than paste. How long will that stay on the hook for?
Well, considering, just supposing you've got a situation in your peg where there's very few fish there, then I'm happy that it's on the hook for 5 or 10 minutes. But just supposing there's, you know, many fish there, normally you get a bite within a few minutes if there's plenty of fish there.
Yeah.
But if there's fish moving around, then I'd say a minute's maximum. So it's understanding what's happening under the water, is how often you go in and out, you know, with your paste, or, you know, how often you...
I would imagine, Andy, and don't let me stop you fishing, but I would imagine this is very much a confidence method.
It is.
Because I would think a lot of anglers would, looking at that there,
yeah,
you think, well, that's going to come off before it gets to the bottom.
Well, this is it, but, you know, if you...
Clearly it doesn't.
Well, I've been fishing this method now for 3 or 4 years. I first thought of it years ago, and it's caught me that many fish that it's something that you really do need to learn, because it is the best paste you'll get. You know, it's not so much what's in the paste, it's just the consistency, how wet that is. Remember, everything that you fed into the swim is like that, lying on the bottom. And if you go and drop a hard bit of paste on top of your sloppy feed that you fed probably half hour ago, then the fish are just not going to take it because it's hard. So the way you put this paste on, I just take a pinch out, a good sized bit like that. Don't mess about with like thumbnail sized bits. You want a good mouthful. Then just take it out, gather it into a ball and dent it with your thumb. And then put the hook in the thumb, press it down again with your thumb and gather it up. And then just before you put it in the pot, what you want to do is just dip it in the water. You've got a bait box full of water here, and that gets it sloppier still. So it is dripping wet. And now, remember I said about the wide lip on the pot? That just gathers it, you know, into the right shape. It slips down there, and that's a nice, you know, mouthful for a big fish.
It's incredible.
And then just dip your fingers in the water again, and you're nice and clean, ready to ship your pole out.
Which I can't wait to see. I can see what you mean about not being able to tangle. I mean...
Yeah, you know, there's no way
nothing to tangle on, is there?
No, that paste falls out there and it can't wrap around the polyball because it's round.
And you're fishing tight to the log?
Well, not tight to the log, I'm just off the end of the log, but the important thing is that I'm in shallow water. Into a margin is where, you know, as it warms up, this is where the fish want to be.
Now, I suppose it goes without saying that with this method, you've got to fish the depth.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's not a method you can fish up in the water, but it's important to be just a little over depth. Because what you don't want is the buoyancy of the polyball pulling the hook out of the paste. So it's important, you know, that's just hanging in the surface tension now. There's no tension.
Ooh, ooh.
Oh, I missed a bite then. But there's no tension from the paste, you know, on the polyball. It's just a slack line between the polyball and the paste. So you're sure that the paste is still on.
Whoa! The one thing about those polyballs is you don't have any trouble seeing the bite, do you?
No, that's another advantage. You can fish, you know, any length of pole you can hold really, but the float's still visible. Yeah.
This is a bit advanced watercraft, really, isn't it?
The beauty about this paste fishing is it just catches big fish. Now, if you enjoy catching big fish, then...
Well, the thing about it is that it doesn't appear threatening on the bottom, does it? It's not like a boilie or even a pellet. So I could see why you could go £150 of these in 5 hours.
Yeah, it don't take long.
And I realise the pot that you're using is probably something you've made yourself, but the polyballs are available commercially, aren't they?
Yeah, sure they are. It's just a standard sort of float these days.
And presumably
it's about ready to kick, I think.
Yeah, it's been damaged, hasn't it?
Yeah, probably through spawning.
Yeah, I think they've just finished. Yeah, pretty fish. I think it's worth mentioning as well that how tight to the margins you fished. I think probably a common mistake with people is looking for deeper water as opposed to shallower water, because when I caught up with you when you were fishing the sweetcorn, you were not much farther than that from the bank on that occasion, were you? And it's April. I mean, last night we had a frost.
Yeah. But the previous days, or even the weeks leading up to today, have been quite mild.
Yes, they have. Today, I think, with this little bit of wind we've had today, this is the first time I've worn a jacket for, well, since I last saw you.
Yeah. But if you can imagine, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, the water's increased in temperature.
Oof.
Mr. Bite there, you know, perhaps 6 or 8 degrees.
Yeah.
And the fish are the first things to realise that. You know they're coming out of winter, they want to get moving and begin to get an appetite, so they seek the warmer water where there's likely to be the most food.
But again, looking at how much you feed in, this is not an expensive method, is it?
Not really. I mean, if you're catching lots and lots of fish, you can get through a couple of bags of pellets and only a bag of paste, so in total you're only looking at 7 or 8 pounds worth of bait, really.
Which is a bit different to a gallon of maggots or a gallon of casters.
And you're catching bigger fish.
Yeah.
And the fishing's more enjoyable.
What's the biggest weight you've had fishing this method?
Oh, blimey, got me there. I remember having £180 at Makins Fishery doing it, and that day I only caught for the last 4 hours, because I wasted the first hour fishing the feeder. I had a couple of fish on it, but first put in on the pole that day, fishing like this, I had a fish and had one, you know, right to the end of the match. And they're all proper sized fish, which they normally are on this type of bait.
Well, today you're pleasure fishing, so you've been able to pick your peg and you're fishing to feature. But does the method work just as well in open water?
Yeah, sure. There's slight differences with the rig. The float would be different because once you start fishing in deeper water, you need a slimmer float that actually registers the paste, you know, that's on your hook. You need to know that, because it's so deep, you need to know that the paste is on the hook. So what I use in that circumstance is a longer float, a self-cocking float. Still no weight on the line, because if you have weight on the line, that'll want to sink faster than the paste, and that'll cause the hook to pull out. Yeah,
that makes sense.
But you know, the shallower the water is with this method,
but what do you
the
use
easier it
when
is
you
to
say
fish.
a longer float? Do you use a sort of dibber type float?
No, it still needs a long bristle. You know, probably 3-inch long bristle, and a wire stem so it sits upright. Even when there's no bait on, it still sits upright. But the weight of the paste will just take the bristle down 1/2 inch so that you know your paste is on.
Right.
And when it pops back up, then you just know your paste has come off. Or sometimes it can be a bite. So you hit every indication like that, and if it's not on, then you just rebait and ship out again.
So how long do you reckon that was in?
That was in about, not 30 seconds.
No,
That.
incredible.
But that's common, that is. You know, there's fish there feeding on the pellets, and they're just waiting for something wet like that to come down and just take it instantly. You know, not even thought of caution.
No, but we look at the tiny area you're fishing in, you find, and you look at the size of fish you catch, you think, well, how many can be there?
Yeah, but you know, that's
it's like you catch one and another one moves in.
That's the main approach to my fishing, is keeping everything tight. You know, get them mouths all in the size of a dinner plate, if you like. And if your bait's in the middle of that dinner plate, then it don't take much working out, but you're going to get a bite.
You're playing a big fish on the pole. Now, and this is a good fish, obviously.
It's pulling there.
It's taking enough elastic out. What's your technique? What goes through your head at this point in time?
Well, as soon as you hook the fish, what you need to do is, you know, don't get the pole high at that point. Just keep pressure on the fish, but keep your pole tip out the water, so you know you keep an eye on your elastic, and then that tells you where the fish is or where it's heading.
Oof.
That's a good fish,
isn't it? Just. Cracking fish.
It's a good fish, that is. Hook come out in the net.
And he's left a hole in the water for another fish to fill, by the sounds of things.
Yeah, hopefully I can get straight back in there.
Look at that.
Catch another fish like that.
And what weight do you reckon that is?
Oh, that's 9, possibly 10 pound, that is.
Super. Let's get back out there. You know, that area you're fishing is not more than a yard square, is it?
No, it's not. But, you know, that's the importance of the way I fish, really, on the pole or the feeder, whatever method. I like to keep the actual area I'm baiting as tight as I possibly can. It's, you know, how many mouths from fish can you get on the size of a dinner plate? And you know, you don't want fish all over your peg, you just want them in a little tight area where your hook bait's going to end up. And then you get more bites like that and catch faster.
You've always been a very innovative angler, but you've always seemed to be innovative in a simple way. The conclusions you've reached have always been very logical.
Yeah.
There is a tendency for anglers to... I was looking at a shotting pattern in one of the magazines the other day, and he'd got 11 number 10s 1 inch apart, and I couldn't understand the rig. I couldn't understand the logic of the rig. I mean, and the occasions I've worked with you, everything I've seen you do has been very simple and very straightforward.
Yeah, I think there's two differences there, because when I used to fish the canals and rivers, and it does pay to string your shot out, because it can catch up with the drift and whatever tow there is on the lake, which is important when you're trying to catch smaller species. But carp fishing's a lot more simple. You know, your rigs can't tangle. They need to be a lot stronger, and you're using bigger baits all the while. So a lot of the time, the actual bait's the weight in your rig, like it is with this method. You know, all I've got is a hook on the end of a piece of line, really, but the actual bait is heavy, and it'll sink as fast as any bulk shot will. And so, you know, it's still a good method in deep water, this is, because it just goes straight down to the bottom.
Oh, this looks like a good fish, Andy.
It does.
Good action on this pole, isn't there?
Frightening, more like.
There's really, all you can do with fish like this is be a bit patient, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, they're all big fish, so it's not like you're going to get one every minute. You don't need to.
No.
If you get one every half hour, you're doing well. So there's, you know, there's no rush to get a fish straight after you've caught one.
But in all honesty, once you've got over the peculiarity of the method, it's simplicity itself, really, isn't it?
Yeah. The main thing is being smooth when you ship in and out.
Yeah.
And getting your end tackle right. Because that just makes it so, you know, so much easier. You can't fish this sort of bait on traditional rigs.
No. No, it's a very much a power rig method, isn't it? Well, I think that's your best one yet.
Yeah, similar size.
It's a cracker. Oof.
Just a typical pace fish, really.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So, there you have it. All you need is some porridge and a poly ball, and you can catch fish like that. He's going to be here all day. I've enjoyed working with Andy. He's a super angler, but the thing that comes across to me more than anything is the simplicity. Everything he does is methodical. His feeding is methodical, his casting is methodical, the way he plays his fish is methodical. And there's no doubt in my mind that we've been in the presence of one of the great anglers. I've enjoyed it immensely. I hope you have. Oh, to be in England now that spring is here. I don't know who said that, but he was right. It's the back end of April, the fish have spawned, the blossom on the trees, the birds are nesting. You know, the commercial course fisheries, in some respects, have been the saviour of our sport. And to some extent, this is where it all started. This is part of the Mallory Park complex. And Roy Marlowe started off by leasing Mallory Park, and then he built the foundation, and then he built this, the glebe, one of the most prolific fisheries in the UK. Wonderful to be here today. It's absolutely crammed with fish. Another pioneer of the commercial course fisheries was Billy Makin, and Billy Makin knew an angler when he saw one. And 20 years ago he said to me, "I've got the best young angler in the UK coming to my fishery. His name's Andy Findlay." Since that time, Andy has won hundreds of matches, literally hundreds of matches. He's a big fish man. He likes to catch big fish. He likes to fish for big fish. And his style is all his own. He's very minimalist. He doesn't carry lots of product around with him. Probably 2 rods, 2 reels. He's down here fishing today, and he's fishing the feeder this morning. and he's devastating on that method. Let's go and have a look and see how he's doing. Morning.
Morning, Dave.
What a fabulous morning.
Yeah, very sunny and warm.
How many have you had?
Well, I've had 4 or 5 casts and I'm into my 3rd fish now.
Oh, so you're struggling then?
Well, yeah, I'm getting plenty of liners as well, so suggests it's going to be a good day.
Extraordinary fishery, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been a place I've fished on and off over the last 5 or 6 years now. And yeah, there's very few like it in the country. Absolutely full of carp.
Is this Lake 4?
This is Lake 4 on the Glebe.
And they're mainly decent fishing here, aren't they?
Yeah, they start from about £2. The carp start from about £2 up to 12 or 14 pound, but there's a good head of skimmers as well.
It's a nice rod. Is that one of the carbon actives?
It is. It's a rod. It's one of the first rods that they made, especially for feeder fishing. I had some input into the design, so the action's right for me. And Preston brought many rods out in the time, which are all very good since this one, but it's just a rod I got used to over the years.
Nice action.
Yeah, I don't find the need to change really.
Actually, just looking at your setup, it's all so compact these days, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
The old days of trying to get a bank stick into a into a gravel bottom. And that's just all an integral part of your kit, isn't it?
That's right. You know, it just saves a hassle of digging about with a bank stick, getting the feeder arm in right for the angle of the rod that you want.
Yeah.
You know, I like to fish with my rod, not pointing at the feeder, but an angle between 30 and 45 degrees I think's right. But the main reason for that is like for the accuracy of the casting. Because I'm casting to an island, you know, you really do need to be accurate. So, you know, that helps with that.
You're fishing with pellets?
Yeah,
are these the new from Preston?
They are from Sonu baits.
They're super. They're super.
They really are. You know,
yep.
they're ready to use out of the bag. They come in resealable bags, but they're not really soft like a soaked expander. They're more like a hard hookable pellet, if you like. They're impregnated with oils, very little preservative, so that the fish aren't put off by them. And they stay on the hair very well.
These boilie stops, are they called boilie stops?
They're not. What they're actually called is a quick stop.
Quick stop. But I think you had a hand in designing them.
I did. You know, it's
another brilliant idea.
Another one of my ideas, and how they work. It's very simple. They're a little plastic stop, but they're actually tied onto the line permanently, and they've got a hole in one end, which you locate the baiting needle into, and you just push everything through the bait. You know, once they're on for good.
I think it's fantastic. Also, I used these new S pellets last weekend, and they're the first ones I've used that you can use on the waggler. They do stay on, don't they?
Well, that's right. Yeah, you know, they're not like a normal a soft expander, whereas you have problems with them coming off, especially when fishing, you know, with a rod where you have to cast. So they're good for that. You know, they are firm. They're still hookable. You don't have to soak them, just use them straight out the back. But you can just hook them on or hair rig them on, you know, with no preparation at all.
That didn't take very long.
No, it's just as soon as the feed hit the water, that. It's only me.
What's your best weight off this lake?
I think it was about £217 2 years ago in a team match. that we fished on here.
That was the ACA Masters, wasn't it?
I think it was. It was just a couple of pegs down to my left.
It's not commonly known because you really have made your reputation on commercial coarse fisheries. But you did have a very successful career on rivers, didn't you, before you turned to this?
I did.
The Soar and the Reed?
Yeah, they were the main two venues I used to fish. And in them days, you know, I really enjoyed, as much as I do now, fishing for them sort of species, chub roach. As soon as Billy Macon, you know, got his fishing going, then it was really, I had to go there, and it just seemed so much more enjoyable catching bigger fish.
I think one of the things that people don't realise is, and I remember talking to you about the seasons of the year, and you do vary your styles, don't you, over the course of the year? I mean, I remember talking to you about fishing matches at Macon's where you didn't put any feed in at all.
That's right. It's just really, it's just knowing the venue where you're fishing and just tailoring your approach to it, really. There's times, even now, you know, that many years ago, but even now, the way the fish feed is very similar in that you don't, during the winter months, then you don't need to feed a lot of bait, or sometimes none at all. What happens there, my quick stops broke off my rig, so I've got to tie another rig on.
Well, actually, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I was going to say to you, before you took out, let's talk about your rig. And I know you have your own way of tying it, so just run me through what you do. Right,
so, okay then. Well, the reason I think quick stops are the best, they really are the best best bait stops you can use. But they have one drawback, and that's that you need to use a really fine mesh landing net. That's because when you've got a fish on, like I had then, and it's moving in the landing net, that the stop can get caught in the mesh,
right,
and actually break it off the hair. So, I mean, that is the first time that's happened for I don't know how long, but if you had, just imagine you had a coarser mesh, then it'd be going through there and getting snapped off all the time.
Right.
So that's the reason they use a very fine mesh net like that. But there might be a little hole in there somewhere that it's got caught.
So let's just, before you tie a hook on, just run me through your set about how you set your feeder up. And
well, what I'm using today, because I'm using pellets in a feeder, and I'm casting the feeder onto shallow water to the margins of an island, I'm using a cage feeder, which is just like a white, well, just
pretty standard.
Fish. Yeah. With the right amount of lead on for the distance I'm casting. I'm casting about 35 yards here, so this is actually a 20-gram feeder. When it's full of pellets, is what I consider the perfect weight to cast over there. So what I've got on the end of it, it's just a 4-pound stretchy main line I'm using. I think the stretching your main line is very important when feeder fishing, because it gives you time, because you need to be accurate when you're casting, and a stretchy line gives you time when you're directing the feeder over to the island. So it makes it easier to be accurate, and that is really the #1 rule with feeder fishing, is how accurate you are with your casting. So what we have is a big loop on the end of the main line. It's actually doubled, this is.
Yes, I
see that. And all I've done is tied a snap link swivel to the end of it, and the feeder's clipped on that, but also...
So it's fixed?
It is, it's fixed. You know, I feel in carp fishing that fixed rigs are better than sliding rigs, because, you know, especially because we're using hair rig baits, you know, the hook's there free, it's not got any bait around it, and it's just free to catch in the mouth of the fish. When the fish like takes the bait, it just hooks against whatever weight you've got on the line, and it's on. You don't need to strike even.
So it's a lightweight bolt rig, as
it is, yeah. It's not, you know, it's more refined to what the carp lads use. It's only 20-gram weight, which is like under 2 ounce when it's full of bait. But what I've also got here is my hook length's clipped onto the same link
And it's easy to change.
It is, yeah. You know, if you're not, I'm not one to keep swapping baits when I'm carp fishing. You know, I know combinations that work, so it's not often I do change baits. I'm using 2 hair rig pellets on here with smaller pellets in the feeder. You know, they just stand out from the feed, and the fish go for them quicker than, you know, they'd eat the feed really.
Yeah, well, if you think back to when you first started fishing, we used ground bait as a carrier, really, didn't we?
Yeah.
I don't think, I mean, when we were talking about white ground bait and brown crumb, there was no nutriment in it for the fish, was there at all? Whereas these things now are developed with the...
I think that's a bite, but it could be a liner. See, there's never any rush when you get a bite in carp fishing, because the fish is up when you're hair rigging.
Now, the average angler would have struck at that straight away, wouldn't he?
That's right, but I think the fish is on there because, you know, it's not let go now, so we're winding. And there you see, the fish isn't on. It didn't actually look like a bite to me because it was moving slowly.
Sadly, Andy, that's a watercraft you can't teach people.
No.
Because most people would think then that fish was on.
Yeah.
Was on. At what point do you determine that's a bite?
Well, like just then really, you know, I was waiting and waiting, hoping that the tip would... Sometimes you get a bite in carp fishing that starts off slow and then it'll go round fast, you know, when the fish finally realises it's hooked. But that time, you know, it was going round and round, but it was only moving slow all the time. And what it must have been was a fish down the middle of the lake just swam into the line, and it might have felt the line on it and like spooked a bit and started moving fast then. But the way the bite started, it never looked like a bite, so that's the reason I left. But like I say, in carp fishing, especially when you're hair rigging, there's never any, you know, rush to hit a bite or instant reaction, because the fish, the way the tip goes round, it suggests to me that the fish is hooked because the speed the tip goes round. So, you know, why strike? All you're doing really is risking breaking your hook length, or, you know, even worse, your rod or something.
Accuracy is all important, isn't it?
It is, yeah. You know, I think the feeder fishing for carp, there's 3 rules, and they've all, you know, you've got to, it's understanding all 3 rules that makes you successful. And the number 1 rule is accuracy. You know, that really is important. Casting it in the right part of the lake where the fish are happy feeding. The second rule really is the actual setup you're using. It's like only a liner. You know, I talked about the rig, that it's the bait you're using. You know, it's trapped inside the feeder. The casting, lay it straight out, so, you know, not let the feeder crash in too heavy. And yeah, I think that's a bite. It's just dropped back then. See, there's still no rush. I'm sure that's on, that is now, because I'm trying to catch up with it. It's dropped back, but there's no tension there, so it's just a case of winding in until you catch up with the fish. And there it is.
Easy game, this fishing, Andy.
Yeah, although I don't think this is a carp, this, so what we call...
Oh, there's skimmers in here, isn't there?
There is, yeah, vermin
is that why you
species
use,
to me.
Is that why you use 2 nets? One for skimmers, one for...
It is.
One for silverfish, one for...
It's a fishery rule at the glebe that you need 2 nets, one for the silverfish and one for carp over £2.
And what's the 3rd golden rule?
The 3rd golden rule really is just the bait preparation, you know, and actually how you put it in the feeder and the combinations. Say I have many combinations, you know, with the methods I use, but I'm not one to, once I start fishing, I'm rarely one to swap baits, you know. If I'm not,
you've never been a complicated angler, have you?
You know, that's my fishing, keep it simple. I know, I go fishing, you know, many times, and I understand what works and what doesn't work. So I just stick to these things that have got 100% confidence in, and that's what you need to have. You need to know that things will work for you when the fish are ready to feed.
Fish?
Yeah. When I've caught up with it.
What's the determining factor whether you use monofilament or braid?
Well, the only time I use braid is I only ever use it for a hook length anyway. So, you know, I never use it for a main line because I think it's too fierce. There's no stretch in it.
No.
So, you know, you do need, like I was saying earlier, you need a stretchy reel line that helps you with your cast. But the only time I will use braid, if it's allowed of course, is for method feeder hook lengths. Because they're so short, you know, the material's under a lot of stress. So for that reason it needs to be really strong, else you get problems with breakages. So the only time I use braid is for method feeder hook lengths.
Yeah. That's a comparatively small fish, probably,
yeah,
isn't it?
It must be one of the...
Pretty fish though.
It is.
Let's go back to these mini pellets that you're using. Now, when you buy a bag of those, they're hard, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, so how do you get them to that texture?
Very simple, really. All I do, what I like using for this type of feeder fishing is it's a range of bait that's been developed by myself, that bait I've been using over the past years for carp fishing, and I find it's perfect for the fishing I do. But you can't use them just out of the bag, they need some preparation so that they stay inside a feeder.
But it's minimal, the preparation.
It is, yeah, it's just a few minutes, and I'll show you how to do it.
You do that and I'll watch your tip.
Okay. They come in a resealable bag, so you don't have to use a whole bag or spill them everywhere after you've used a half a bag. I
think this is a great idea, this resealable.
It is, yeah.
Because we've all got half-empty bags of pellets, haven't we?
That's right, spilling into your carrier. Yeah. So this is the way I prepare the pellets. All you do is tip them into a bait box full of water, so to make sure that they're covered in the water. Because these pellets are 2 mil, then they need 2 minutes to soak. And if there were 4 mil pellets, then they'd need 4 minutes, and so on.
Simple enough.
Yeah.
And what sizes do they come in?
They come in the range from 2 mil right up to 10 mil. But normally for feeder fishing on commercial fisheries, then 2 mil and 4 mil are the only sizes I use. If all the fish were like £8 and over here today, then I'd use the 4 mil.
But you know when you squeeze it into the feeder, it doesn't turn into a paste. When it goes into the water, do they separate again?
Yeah, oh yeah, they do. You know, that's the most important thing about it. You know, you might as well be using ground bait. You know, it's not as effective as just putting pellets in. So they've been in the water, they need another minute really.
Right. Well, we've got all day.
Right, yeah.
I think it's fair to say that's a fish.
Yeah, could have pulled my rod in if I didn't pick my rod up at that time.
If you were a pleasure angler, well, no, I'll rephrase that. You're obviously not a pleasure angler. But if a pleasure angler was sat with you today and said, Andy, what are the do's and don'ts of feeder fishing, this type of fishing with pellets, what advice would you give them?
Well, the do's, what I've said earlier really, is your casting. You know, practice your casting and get it as good as you can. And understand where the fish want to feed. I mean, you would catch just casting the feeder into the middle of this lake today, but you wouldn't catch nowhere near enough, you know, as you would casting it tight to the island, because the fish, because it's warming up now, the fish want to be in the shallow water. And the shallow waters, you know, over the other side of the lake.
Far bank,
yeah, that's the drag just coming into play there. And just understanding really, you know, what works and why it works, you know, and just tailor your rigs to them reasons really.
Mm-hmm. I think also, Andy, patience is a key as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but it's no good, you know. If you're doing something wrong and you're patient, then you're just waiting too long before fish. You need to understand, you know, what rigs work, and you know, and then you can be patient after that if you like.
Yeah. Yes, they have a, just picking up on what you were saying, they have an expression in golf that there's little point in practicing your faults. And I suppose that's basically what you've just said, you know, by all means be patient, but make sure you're doing it right to start with.
That's right. It's no good, you know, fishing a wrong method or doing something wrong and expecting the fish to feed eventually. You know, when really you should be catching when you're trying to be patient.
Don't get many of them in a pound, do you?
Oh, no, that's what I say. You don't need to catch all day long if they're that size. Soon put a big weight together.
That's a nice fish.
It is.
What do you reckon that is?
It's got to be 8 to 9 pounds. No, that's.
It certainly didn't want to come out, did it? Oh, I say. Oh, what a pretty fish.
What a nice fish to end on.
Eh? Beautiful. What is it about truly talented sportsmen that they make it look so easy? And we know it's not. I've really enjoyed today, and the thing I enjoy about seeing Andy fish is he always keeps it simple. Nothing complicated about it. He showed us how he mixes his pellets. He showed us how he puts his pellets on the hook. Nothing complicated about it at all. The key is accuracy. That's the real key. Clipping up, casting to the same spot time and time again, not striking into every time the tip moves. He's had a wonderful net of quality fish, and I've enjoyed it immensely. I'm going to catch up with Andy again. The next time I catch up with him, he's going to be showing us how he fishes the method. And this is a method that he helped develop on this complex. I hope you've enjoyed today. I've enjoyed it immensely. See you soon. Bye.